Shabbat Shalom. Happy Memorial Day weekend. Shh. Good morning, good morning. Come on. Nice to have you all here. Shabbat Shalom. Thanks for joining us. We want to welcome the Gottlieb and Turbo families. Thank you for joining us and share our prayers for Stanley's wonderful, wonderful life. It's nice to have you here. Shh. This morning, following our Torah study, there's two very important events in the synagogue. This morning, we have a bar mitzvah, Ethan Shmuel Hoffman, Rabbi Hoffman's kid's having his bar mitzvah. This is important because it's the first time we've had a rabbi's kid bar mitzvah since my son Rafi, 15 years ago, so this is a big deal. He's a really lovely kid, really gentle, sweet kid. And as well, this morning, because it's Memorial Day, we have a custom of welcoming veterans to the shul and to offer them our blessings. Our speaker this morning, for a very brief moment, will be Glenn Schechter, who's the local commander of the American Legion. He'll talk about, come in, Barry, get space, this space here. We'll be talking about the American Legion. We'll be honoring those who are veterans of America and other militaries in the world. We should have a couple of hundred people. And then after lunch, there will be lunch. That's the name of a movie. There will be. After lunch, there will be a panel discussion with some of our vets, led by Harvey Keenan, who's a member of our counseling center. Come in. So please join us for that. This week is the final days of the Omer. Oh, thank you so much. You have earned your place in the world to come. That's all it took. Yeah, all those mitzvahs you did, and God says, "Did you get the rabbi coffee?" And you said, "Yes." Okay, come in. Right? This week is Shavuot begins on Tuesday night. Shavuot, the custom of Shavuot, Erev Shavuot, we gather for learning as we prepare to receive the Torah. So this year Shavuot's Tuesday night, this coming Tuesday night. So tomorrow's Sunday, then comes Monday, which is the holiday, then Tuesday. Tuesday night, 7 o'clock, we'll gather for a light meal. Anyone who wants to come, it's open and free. And then at 7:30, we're going to be welcoming 7 other synagogues here, hopefully a large congregation. Our guest is going to be Mark Hetfield, who is the president and CEO of HIAS, H-I-A-S, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, was the organization founded 150 years ago to help Jewish immigrants from Europe and elsewhere arrive and settle in America. Many of us are here in America because of HIAS's work. When HIAS sort of figured out that there weren't a lot of Jews coming to America anymore, they switched they turned their emphasis from Jewish refugees to refugees worldwide. Their motto basically is, we used to save Jews, now we save because we are Jews. And they are responsible for monitoring the world refugee crisis and for advocating policies in America and elsewhere of humane treatment of refugees. They're going to be, Mark is going to come and talk to us about the world refugee crisis and what a Jewish responsibility is toward that. And we'll have a chance to talk to him and ask some hard questions about the current administration, about the world, and what ought to be America's policy toward refugees, what ought to be Jewish values toward refugees. Following that, we'll break into some small groups and get to learn with all these rabbis. So a lot of rabbis you haven't met yet, or rabbis you haven't gotten across town to see, will be here and we can learn with them. And then there'll be plenty of blintzes. And after late night from 10:30 on, Rabbi Farkas, for the hardy and young among us, will be leading late night study. And they usually go till about 1, 2 o'clock in the morning because they're crazy. And then Wednesday, Thursday, we have shul. Of course, Thursday we'll do Yizkor. So those who are remembering loved ones this year can come Thursday morning and hear the Yizkor prayers. But please come Tuesday night. It'll be a very, very, very interesting conversation, okay? That's about all we got today. Any other announcements I forgot? I have not started to fiddle with the air conditioning, but I will soon, yeah. It's warm? Yes. I'm going to make sections, pre-menopause, post-menopause. In the middle will be menopause, which means you'll be hot and cold, All right, so let me see if I can do this. Ready? Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu, l'taken et mezug avir. Umain. This morning's Torah portion is Bamidbar. It's the first section. You don't need a chumash. It's the first section in the book of Numbers. It's called the book of Numbers because that first section begins with a census. The Israelites, having spent 2 years and 2 months at Mount Sinai, are about to resume their journey toward the Promised Land. And before you can take that journey, you got to know who's with you. So it begins with a census. It's a dreadfully dull Torah portion. That's it. Just dreadfully dull. Because all it is the names of each tribe, the names of the clans within those tribes, and the numbers of people that are with them. Of course, if you're studying refugees, it's probably good because it's a counting of refugees. But really, the tradition rescued us because it gives us a Haftorah. The rabbinic tradition decided very early in the course of the rabbinic tradition that Jewish literacy is attached to Jewish spirituality. You have to know how to read in order to come close to God. And that's why when you walk into a church, the thing you see right away at the front, the visual focus of a church is a cross. Because that is the symbol for the Christian community. The cross, the passion of the Christ, is the symbol of the Christian community of the encounter between divinity and humanity, between heaven and earth. The cross, and it even looks it, is the place where heaven and earth come together. When you walk into a shul, hopefully you don't see a cross. When you walk into a shul, you see Aron HaKodesh, the holy ark where we keep the Torah scrolls. It has the same symbolic value because for a Jew, the Torah is that place where heaven and earth touch. The Torah is the way in which heaven intervenes into earth and humanity can rise to become heavenly. I made a joke, but the bracha that you say, Asher Kiddishanu B'mitzvotav, you have elevated us, God, to the level of sanctity by means of mitzvah. Now, if, in fact, the Torah is your way toward divinity, that means that literacy is attached to spirituality, which is why universal literacy was a common value in Jewish communities throughout Jewish history, which is why when nobody knew how to read in medieval Europe, Jews all knew how to read and write, including women, by the way. Everyone had to learn how to read and write because that was how you participated in the community, in the spiritual life of the community. You know, I grew up in a house where books were sacred. You know, any book, you dropped it, you kissed it. I mean, not just a sitter, the phone book you kissed. I mean, because my parents grew up with this old Jewish value that every book is somehow sacred. When I went to college, my dad wanted to buy my books. You know, we had a budget for college, you know, how much I could spend. The dormitory he paid for and the food service he paid for, and he'd send me a little money for gasoline and beer, you know, and other things, you know. But books were off the budget. When my pop used to say, books are off the budget, go buy it. I say, Pop, it's an expensive book. He says, good, go buy it. Bring it, show it to me. I mean, it was this idea that books were somehow always sacred. That's that Jewish value. Now, in order to enforce that value, what the tradition did was it took the 5 books of the Torah and it divided into 54 sections, and we read one a week for the whole year. You show up in shul for a year, you become literate. You've learned the whole Torah, right? But they weren't satisfied with the 5 books because the next section of the Hebrew Bible is called prophets. There's 8 books of prophets, right? And then what they did is they divided up the prophets, but not quite as systematically. And they assigned a section for each Torah portion. It's read after the Torah is read. So the word haftarah means closing section. I think we have a seat up here because Pop's not coming. Michael's coming? Yeah. But there's one over here. We got seats. Come on in. 2 on the aisle. I think we scared these people away. You can stay. It's all right. Nebuch. I think we scared these people away. I haven't said anything political yet. Wait. Yeah, that's true. It's true. Yeah, listen, I'm going to go visit Jared in prison, so that's okay. I think a lot of American Jews would be willing to do that, right?
Ed, they're saying now he's the brains behind the whole ministry.
I know.
I hope so. Because that means that there are brains. Now, the Haftarah is a section from the biblical prophets assigned to the Torah reading. How did they assign them? They looked for certain kind of linguistic cues and thematic cues, okay? So, and typically what we do in synagogues like this one is, if you have a bar mitzvah kid or a bat mitzvah kid, we make them read some of the Torah and we make them read the Haftarah. It's read with a different trope, a different melody than the Torah is read. Okay? Now, this week, the Torah portion is this very dry census. So you can take a look at it, but you'll get the idea in the first 3 lines. The Haftarah is spectacular. The Haftarah is the prophet Hosea. And so this morning I want to take a look at prophets, and in particular Hosea and his partner whose name was Amos. And that's what I've given you here, okay? Let's begin with a simple definition. We use the word prophet in English to mean numbers of things. A prophet is a person who sees the future. Prophecies are what's going to happen. I want you to try to banish that idea from your mind. The Hebrew word is navi, or nivuah, means prophecy, navi. A navi, a prophet in ancient Israel, was a unique social condition. This is not like anything we have in our culture. You can analogize and say, well, the prophet was sort of like a social critic. Yes, but not exactly. He was sort of like a political either advisor or critic of the king. Yes, but not exactly. He was a religious functionary. Not exactly. It's a unique social condition based on a unique culture of ancient Israel. Fundamentally, a prophet was a person who saw the world with different eyes than the rest of us do. The essence of prophecy is not what he says, it's what he sees. We think of a prophet as a sort of ventriloquist dummy sitting on God's lap, right? God speaks through the prophet. Hello, and doesn't move his lips. So we say, oh, he's speaking the word of God. But what's really interesting is that can't be true, and I'll show you why in a moment. Because each prophet speaks differently. One God, presumably every prophet should sound alike, no matter who his ventriloquist dummy is. But each prophet speaks differently. So prophecy is this unique sort of combination, a sort of harmony and resonance between the personality and the personal experiences and the personhood of the prophet and the divinity that enters him. The divinity that enters him. Now, what's interesting about this whole phenomenon is that nowhere in the Bible is this self-consciously described. You just open the book and it says, thus says God. And you say, what? Like, what do you mean, thus says God? What does that mean? Did he hear it? Did he see it? Did he feel it? Did he know it? Are these his speeches? Are these his edited versions of his speeches? Who edited them? Who put them together? We have a certain number of prophets in the Bible. You have Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. Those are long books. And then an anthology of 13 short books, right? Were there others? Was there Bob, the prophet? How come Bob didn't get in a book? Who decided to include Isaiah but leave out Bob? Right? Is this everything Isaiah said, or is this just the good stuff? The greatest hits? We don't know any of this stuff. This is all guesswork. All we have is the unself-conscious text. That is, the text that is presented to us as the speeches of the prophets. Now, when did these guys live? When did they live? A quick Jewish history lesson, okay? Moses takes the people of Israel through the desert. We arrive at the boundaries of the Promised Land. More or less, 1300 BCE, more or less. We enter the Promised Land under Joshua, and we settle there as tribes. More or less, 1250 BCE, okay? We lived 200 years without a central government as independent tribes living in the land of Canaan. After 200 years, and each time those tribes have enemies. There are certain outside tribes that make incursions into ancient Israel. That's the period of the Judges. The book of Judges is about that. Then there arrives an enemy that can't be dealt with in that same way. They're called Philistines. The Philistines were a Greek tribe who came from Attica across the Mediterranean, across Asia Minor, down through Lebanon, and settled in the southwest corner of Canaan. The cities of Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Ekron, and Gat. 5 great Philistine cities. The Philistines had things that the other enemies we'd faced never had. Number 1, they had iron. This was the Bronze Age. You're wearing bronze armor. Someone shoots you with an iron-tipped spear, you're dead. Iron, big problem. Number 2, they had chariots. Chariots did to warfare then what the tank did to warfare in the First World War. Completely revolutionized the practice of warfare. And the third thing they had was a mutual defense treaty among these 5 cities, so that if one got attacked, the other 4 came to their aid. The Israelites could not defeat the Philistines. The Philistines began pushing into Israelite territory. So the Israelites go to the prophet Samuel and they say, give us a king who will defeat our enemies. Samuel doesn't want to do that. He tries to talk them out of it. He's unsuccessful. They elect Saul. Saul tries to push back the Philistines. For a while he's successful and then he's unsuccessful. But within Saul's administration is a young desert warrior by the name of David. David is the once and future king of Israel. David, upon Saul's death, assumes the kingship, unites the tribes of Israel into one powerful national entity, repels the Philistines, and then begins building an empire. Turns that empire over to his son Solomon, who continued to build it as an international trading power. Upon Solomon's death, the kingdom of Israel splits, and we have not one but 2 Jewish countries. Imagine that. The one I live in and the one I wouldn't be caught dead in, right? Right? Those bastards, you know. So we split north and south. The southern kingdom is located in Jerusalem, is capitaled in Jerusalem. It's a sort of backwater. The northern kingdom, which is called Israel, the southern kingdom is Judea, the northern kingdom is Israel, capitaled in Samaria, becomes quite the regional power. And its capital, Samaria, becomes a regional trading center and a regional cultural center and a powerful military center. And it's that begins, you see the beginning of ancient Israelite prophecy. Because in ancient Samaria, the capital of the northern kingdom, we're talking about 800 BCE, okay? 800 before, between 800 and 700 BCE, the 8th century. You have several phenomena that come together all at once. Number one, urban life. The Bible hates cities. According to the Bible, who founded the first city? Cain. That tell you something? Right? Cities, because cities have certain phenomenon that people who live in villages can't stand. I mean, it's fun to come to the big city and see the bright lights and the big boulevards, but there's moral problems with the city. In a village, everybody knows each other. In a village, you can't have major crime because we know your mother. You can't have prostitution. How are you going to go to a prostitute? You dated her mother in high school. You're her daughter? Oh, put your clothes back on, you know. And you can't be anonymous, you know. You're not John, you're Eddie, you know. No, I'm John, you know. But in a city, you can have prostitution because nobody knows each other. You have urban anonymity. In a village, you can't have systemic poverty. Because if someone grows poor in a village, the rest of the town's going to come and take care of them. No one's going to let that family get poor, even if they're unlucky, even if they're lazy. We're going to take care of each other. In a city, you have slums. Because who the hell cares about those people? They're not my problem. You have the social inequality that breeds a kind of systemic poverty, generational poverty, and the degradation of generational poverty. You have juvenile delinquency. You have children without parents. All of the kinds of phenomenon of urban anonymity and urban social invisibility, and the prophets represent an attack on that. You'll hear that in just a moment. The second thing that you have is religious, what they call syncretism, which means religious mishmash. The first problem you have is the following. If you're the king of Samaria, you're the king of Israel located in Samaria, you're running a city-state. There are all of these small city-states around you, and in the background is the great empire of Babylon. And you know they're coming eventually, so what do? You form alliances with all the local city-states in order to repel any kind of potential invasion from the great empire. The way that you form alliances is you marry your children to the princesses of those other kingdoms. And you move those princesses into the capital city, and you build a palace for each one of them. We have found these palaces. They have been excavated archaeologically. Every one of these young women had a palace. Next to its palace was a temple to her god. So suddenly, downtown Wilshire Boulevard through Samaria is a center of the worship of a dozen foreign gods. And that has an effect on the culture of a city. The other thing that goes on here, which you'll see in Hosea in just a minute, the other background effect, is the difference geographically between northern Israel and southern Israel. Now, if you haven't been to Israel, Rabbi Hoffman has a trip going in December, and I'm going to have a trip next year sometime. You got to go there just to see this. Southern Israel, Judea, Jerusalem is a barren desert filled with rocks. They grow rocks there, and they do them well. They have a lot of them, right? Jerusalem is a city built out of the same colored rock. Everything in Jerusalem looks the same, right? That's why you should stay in a 3-star hotel, because it's the same as the 5-star hotel. It's just the shampoo's better, that's all. So, but it's all made out of stone. And so you can make a claim in Jerusalem that there's only one God, because that's what the landscape looks like. It's only, right? It looks all the same, and it never changes. Winter, spring, summer, fall, it's the same. You go to northern Israel, woo, tropical paradise. Rainforest, it's not rainforest, but it rains a lot. And it's lush, and it's green, and the seasons change. And you have a real sense of the fertility of nature in northern Israel. So farmers and Jews living in or Israelites living in the north of Israel, they began adopting the practices of their local Canaanite neighbors. They would worship the God of their ancestors, but on occasion, just to hedge their bets, they would also worship the local Canaanite gods. The Canaanite had 2 very vivid gods. The male principle of the universe was called Baal. Baal was represented as a figurine of a bull, usually with a long phallus. And you prayed to Baal to rain his fructifying rain down on the earth. You needed to rain. The earth was represented as Asherah or Ishtar. Asherah is represented either as a tree or more commonly as a woman with bulbous breasts and a large swollen belly. Think Britney Spears, right? Okay? And you prayed that she gave you the fertility of her land. And so the whole idea was to get Baal to inseminate Asherah. Can I say that in shul? Okay. That's the idea. That's the idea, right? Now, if you're an ancient Israel farmer and you're planting your crops and you're saying, I wonder if it's going to rain this year. I need it to rain. Because there's no irrigation, because there's no water to irrigate with. You got to get rain. So you pray to the God of Israel to rain. But just to hedge your bets, you also go and place a little offering at the altar of Baal. Every ancient Israelite city that we have excavated, in every home in every ancient Israelite city that we have excavated, we have found figurines of Baal and Asherah. In other words, everybody had a Christmas tree. You think assimilation is a new problem for the Jewish people? Right? Everyone adopted this. Now, if you wanted to go whole hog, as it were, you could go to a Canaanite temple. You could go to a Canaanite temple where they had rites. And now these rites were something. What you would do, you would pay a large fee, if you were a farmer, say, and you would then borrow, hire, rent a beautiful young male or female priest or priestess. You would take that person out to the fields on the night of the new moon, and you would have sexual congress in the fields. And at the moment of truth, the farmer would withdraw and pour his seed on the field, hoping that Baal will do the same. Right? Cultic prostitutes of both genders was part of Canaanite worship. And that made religion somewhat more interesting, wouldn't you say? Because sympathetic magic is always part of Canaanite worship. So this became the practice, right? Now, the prophets are going to look at all of this, and they're going to see a terrible corrupting effect of all of this. A corrupting effect morally of the city, and a corrupting effect religiously of these Canaanite practices, and that's going to be the attack of the prophets. So into this town come 2 men. Amos comes from Tekoa, which is a small village near Jerusalem. Today it's on the West Bank. It's a big settlement on the West Bank. He's a farmer. He's not a prophet. So you got to imagine, I like to think of him as this tall, bald fellow with overalls on. And he don't talk real good because he's just a farmer. And he comes into the town of Samaria with its boulevards and its statuary and its palaces, and he says, what the hell is going on here? Jeez-oo-wee, look at this. And if you read the first chapter, it's really very interesting because it's the street sermon he gave. And he starts out by saying, let me tell you what God's going to do to the Moabites. And you imagine there's a few people going around going, I hate the Moabites. Them Moabites are evil. Tell us, prophet, what are they going to do to the Moabites? And he rains down his prophecy. God's going to destroy the Moabites. And the crowd goes, yes. And what's God going to do to Ammonites? Oh, I hate them Ammonites. And the crowd gets bigger. More people come around. I hate them. What's God going to do to the Midianites? Oh, they're evil, those Midianites. Oh, and then now the crowd's getting bigger and bigger. You ever see one of these street guys? Anyone ever been to Speaker's Corner, London? You know what this looks like? Right? You know, or 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica. I mean, the guy can't juggle, but he can prophesy, right? Right? And then he said, what God gonna do to the next group? You know, and he goes on, and then he goes through 6 of them. And then finally he says, to the Judeans. And now the crowd's huge. What's God gonna do to them evil Judeans? And the crowd goes, let's damn those. Wait a minute, my cousin lives down there. And then finally, after it's 7 and 1, that's the theory. Here comes number 8. And he says, for 3 transgressions of Israel, for 4 I will not revoke it. And the crowd goes, yes, damn the, wait a minute, that's us. There's a huge crowd around him now. And he says to the Israelites who are gathered around him this, because you've sold for silver those whose cause was just, and the needy for a pair of sandals. Now you understand what he's doing here. He's saying to them, you think that you are God's chosen people, and you think that gives you moral immunity. You think that provides you with a sort of moral license to live any life you want because God will always protect you from the forces of the world. Well, let me tell you something. It don't work that way. The God who will punish the evil nations who live around you, and you all prayed for that God should destroy our enemies, well, he's going to do the same to you. Because not only does God hold nations accountable for their moral behavior, God holds you accountable, and not just for your moral behavior, but you have a higher standard. Yes, just like the New York Times, God holds Israel to a double standard of morality. Because while the nations around you will be punished for gross international crimes, you're going to be punished for domestic evil. And here's the thing that you'll notice about prophets. Prophets see things the rest of us have learned not to see. Prophets see things, the moral evil. So let me just say it this way. Every urban center contains a certain degree of evil. We who live in that center, we don't see it. We just don't see it. We've become inured to it. We're immune to it. We don't see it anymore. It don't bother us anymore, right? There are 49,000 homeless people in Los Angeles County. It doesn't bother us tonight. We're going to go have a nice bar mitzvah, right? There are kids who go to crowded, broken schools without supplies. That doesn't bother us anymore. Right? There are crowded waiting rooms in public hospitals in this city full of families who can't get medical care. That doesn't bother us anymore. And what medical care they gained the last 2 years now to be snatched away from them. That doesn't bother us anymore. There is moral evil living in our midst, but we've learned not to see it. We build freeways over it so we don't have to see it, right? The prophet sees it. Not only does the prophet see it, he's hypersensitive. He's hypersensitive. It's like, you know how your dog can hear frequencies you can't hear? The prophet can hear the cry of the poor and the broken that you and I can't hear. And he can't sleep. He just can't live with this. He feels their pain. And that's what motivates him to scream. But he's screaming at people who don't understand what are you talking about, the needy? Prophet, look around you. Look at the boulevard. Look at the beautiful public squares we've built. Look at the monuments, the palaces. Look at the public art. Look, what a beautiful city this is. Why are you making such a big deal that we have a slum? Everybody has a slum. Big deal, that's part of life. Come on. If those people were more righteous, they would make a living. They're lazy. They don't need food stamps, right? Food stamps encourage dependency, so let's end food stamps. That was the guy on the radio this morning when I woke up, right? Right, there's Mulvaney. You know, yeah, that's what he said this morning. He said it straight out. He said public assistance encourages dependency. We have to end this dependency. So the prophet, he's just like, He's unreasonable. He's an irritant. People hate him. Because who wants to be reminded all that? Shut up. Go to a Dodger game. Chill. Come on. You know, you go to a Dodger game, he'll remind you that Chavez Ravine, was a slum and we destroyed it and sent all those people. All right, never mind. Because they've sold for silver those whose cause was needy, and the needy for a pair of sandals, who trample the heads of the poor into the dust of the ground, and make humble walk a twisted course, and thereby profane my holy name. We did this last week, remember? Right? You recline by every altar on garments taken in pledge. That's such a brilliant thing. You steal the clothes off the back of the poor and then use it as a drop cloth to have a picnic next to the temple. Wine, you drink in the house of their gods wines bought with fines they imposed. Right? You charge usurious interest to the poor who need to eat, and then you buy your sacrifices with that, right? Hear this word, O people of Israel, the Lord has spoken concerning you, concerning that whole family I brought up from the land of Egypt. You alone have I singled out of the families of the earth. That's why I will call you to account for your iniquities. Now that's the difference between the popular theology and the prophetic theology that you will find across all the prophets. The popular theology is, we are God's chosen people, nothing can happen to us. We are immune from history. History will pass us by, nothing bad will happen to us. The prophet said, on the contrary, you of all people will be called to account for your moral behavior. Your covenant with God is not absolute, it is conditional, and it is conditioned upon your adherence to the moral values and the religious values of the covenant. People said, oh, prophet, get out of here. They didn't want to hear this. They didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to hear it. So where did he go? He starts out at the temple, at the shrine of Bethel or Dan. Then he goes to the Sumerian Republican Ladies Club. Yes, that's right. He goes to the country club of Samaria during the Republican Women's Luncheon. So you have a ballroom filled with very well appointed, very well coiffed, bejeweled Republican Sumerian ladies, or Democrat Sumerian ladies. I mean, it's not partisan, just Sumerian, upper crust Sumerian ladies. And they're eating tea sandwiches, whatever the hell those are. And they're drinking the little dainty things that upper crust ladies like to eat and drink, right? And in walks this large, clumsy, ugly farmer wearing overalls, who smells like a farmer smells wearing overalls, right? You know what I'm talking about? And as he's walking in, he knocks over a few buffet tables and upsets the dishes on the table. And he walks to the middle of the room and he asks one particular lady if she would give up her chair. And she's so, woo, and she gets up and he stands up on her chair. Look at chapter 4. And he says, hear this word, you cows of Bashan. That's a great way to introduce yourself, right? Don't you think that? Parot Bashan. Bashan is the name of the region, right? Hear this word, you west side cows, right? On the hill of Samaria, who defraud the poor, who rob the needy, who say to your husbands, bring, let's carouse. My Lord God swears by his holiness, behold, days are coming upon you when you will be carried off in baskets. The last one in fish baskets and taken out of the city, each one through a breach straight ahead and flung on the refuse heap. I mean, what he says to them is, this city is going to be destroyed. And the walls will be breached. The walls that protect you. So the enemy's not going to have to go far to take you out of the city. They're going to put you in fish baskets. Maybe there was fish on the table, and that's what he was doing. He says, you're going to be like that fish. You see the trout in front of you there? The salmon? That's you, baby. You're going, and you're going to take you right out to the garbage heap, right? And flung on the refuse. I will put sackcloth on all loins. That means mourning. And tonsure on every head. I will make it mourn as for an only child, as all of it as on a bitter day. I will turn your festivals into mourning and your songs into dirges. There's a line in the Psalms which is the opposite. In the line of Psalms, I'll turn your mourning into dancing. So he turns a familiar line of poetry upside down. I will darken the earth on a sunny day and make the sun set at noon. How popular do you think this guy was? How popular do you think he was? And no, don't turn the page yet. Aren't you enjoying this? Don't turn the page so fast. Come on. Come on. The people he hated the most were the priests. Because he felt what the priests did, and the prophets generally felt this way, it wasn't that they were against ritual. They were against ritual that masked the moral brokenness of the society. So the priest, who not only was complicit in the immorality of the society, the priest who helped mask it by telling them, "Oh, God blesses you, don't worry." He's the enemy most of all. So what happens is, when Amos comes, he has this confrontation with the priest. The priest's name is Amaziah. That's the top right-hand corner here, chapter 7. Amaziah, the priest of Bethel, sent the message to the king. Amos is conspiring against you within the house of Israel, for the country cannot endure the things he's saying. That's a hell of a statement when you think about it, right? The country cannot endure the things he's saying. There are certain words that can overturn governments, right? For Amos said, Jeroboam shall die. Jeroboam's the name of the king. Shall die by the sword. And by every measure, by the way, he was a very successful king. He ruled for 50 years. His kingdom was prosperous, was safe, was powerful militarily, was significant internationally. By every measure, this was a successful king. And into the town comes this big, dumb, plain-speaking, smelly farmer. And the priest, the holy priest of Bethel, can't live with this guy is a problem, right? He should be exiled from, and he's saying that you'll be exiled from your soil. So Amaziah confronts him. Priest confronts prophets. Just think of that confrontation, right? It's just like Meet the Press, only on steroids, right? Seer, off with you to the land of Judah. Go home. Go. You came from the south, go back to the south. He's a southerner, right? Off with you to this land of Judah. Earn your living there and do your prophesying there. Now, what he's talking about is very simple. There were bands of people wandering around who called themselves prophets. These were bands of ecstatics. They would dance themselves into sort of ecstatic trances and make all kinds of wacko predictions. And so Amaziah associates Amos with those guys. And he says, go make a real living, for God's sakes. What are you wasting your time doing this for? Right? Don't ever prophesy again at Bethel. It is a king's sanctuary and a royal prophet. You don't belong here. And Amos says something very powerful. He says to him, Lo Navi velo ben Navi. I am not a prophet, and I'm not a prophet's disciple. I'm a cattle breeder and a tender of sycamore figs. This is a brilliant political speech. I'm not a prophet. I'm just a plain man. I'm a farmer. I'm a tree. I plant trees. But I know something about life. I know something about truth. I see what you are. But the Lord took me away from following the flocks, and the Lord said to me, go prophesy to my people Israel. He says, I'm not a professional prophet. I'm a farmer. But I can't close my eyes. I can't close my eyes to what I see around me. And this is a unique voice within Jewish culture. I want you to feel this voice, because it never existed again, by the way. After the destruction of the temple in 586, we came back. There were 3 more prophets, and then we ended. The rabbis actually put an end to it. Today, if you stand on the bima of Valley Beth Shalom and you say, God has spoken to me, I'm a prophet, we'll get you some Haldol. A little lithium will take care of that, right? We don't listen to prophets, because prophets, but for a moment in the history of Israel, this phenomenon was remarkable, and this voice was preserved for us by the tradition. Because what is interesting is not that they prophesy in the name of God as if that has authority. The authority isn't the name of God. God spoke to me and said. The authority is that he's calling them to account for the covenantal promises they made. You made a promise to live as a holy people. What does that mean? You made a promise to create a sacred society. What does that mean? You call yourself a people of justice. What does that mean? What does that mean? And that really is that's the essence of the prophet. That's the essence of the prophet's message. Now, that's prophet number 1. Before we get to prophet number 2, we got a question. Billy.
I got 2 questions.
Only 2.
Yeah. Number 1, the prophets were never listened
Only one. Only one successful prophet in all of Jewish history and in all the Bible. Jonah. And you know why he was successful? Because he didn't talk to Jews. No, this is serious. The book of Jonah is one of the funniest books of the Bible because Jonah goes to the heart of darkness. He goes to Nineveh, which is the capital of the Assyrian Empire. The Assyrians are the people who destroyed the north of Israel. They destroyed Samaria. He goes to the heart of darkness. He goes to Berlin. He goes to the worst place in the world. He walks in and he says 4 words. Right? 40 days, Nineveh's toast. That's it. 4 words. There are 66 chapters of beautiful literary prophecy under the name of Isaiah. How many Jews did Isaiah turn into righteous people? 0. There are 57 chapters of Jeremiah's prophecy. How many people repented because of Jeremiah? 0. Jonah speaks 4 words. This is what the book of Jonah is. It's a really funny joke on Jews. It would be anti-Semitic if we didn't tell it about ourselves, right? Right. So don't tell Richard Spencer this, but, he speaks 4 words to the Assyrians, and everybody in the Assyrian Empire, the king, every person, including the animals. According to the book of Jonah, cows and sheep got on the ground and repented their evil. Dogs apologized to cats. Cats apologized to dogs. Cockroaches promised not to invade your kitchen. Everything that lived in Nineveh did tshuva. That's the story. He's the only prophet that ever got anybody to do anything. That teach you something? Be careful. I told you once, there was a kid who came to me, maybe one of your kids. He was an out-of-work actor, but he was an actor, and he said to me, Rabbi, I have this great idea. On Yom Kippur, I want to put on a robe and take a stick, and I want to stand in front of VBS, and I want to read the words of the prophet. And I want to pretend I'm a prophet and see what happens. And I said, I'll tell you what'll happen. They'll do to you what they did to the prophets. They'll beat you to death with their pocketbooks, That's what happened to Amos. You can imagine those societies. You call ladies cows of Bashan. They're gonna kill you with their Weight Watcher cards. They're just gonna beat you to death. That's what happens to. No one wants to hear this. No one wants to hear that you're morally inadequate. No one wants to hear that you're religiously wanting. People want to know that you're okay. That's why Amaziah had such a nice living. That's why he was so afraid of Amos, right? Billy, go ahead.
Number 2.
Yeah.
Did they only write about social commentary?
No, turn the page. I'm coming to that.
What? Did they write about the Torah?
They didn't write about the Torah. The word Torah is not used. The word God's word, the phrase God's word, God's commandments is used a lot. Yes, please, Sherry.
Do you believe that God actually spoke to them?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. There's so many things we don't know about these guys. How they were collected, how they were edited. Are these all of their speeches or just some of their speeches? Were they speeches altogether or were they delivered in the front page of the New York Times? But the most important thing we don't know is this. What did the prophet mean when he said, "Thus says God"? Did he hear a voice? There is a scientist named Julian James. He was a British scientist who thinks that there were certain changes physiological in the human brain at certain points of human history. There is a connection between your right brain and your left brain. And James argues that in certain people, in certain points of history, that connection was more robust than it is now. And so you would hear in your left brain, that's your verbal brain, the voice of your right brain and assume it was another person. Now, that sounds a little bit like schizophrenia, right? Right? No, but that's what he argued. He argues that because you have seers and prophets and soothsayers in every ancient culture, and they were taken seriously. So it might have been a phenomenon that was more common than it is. That's what he argues. Most brain scientists dismiss it. But the idea is, did they really hear a voice? And if they didn't hear a voice, what does it mean to say, "Thus says God"? The other question you got to ask is the following. Was there another prophet who was walking around on the opposite side? Remember point, counterpoint. Was there a prophet who was saying, "Nah, come on, everything's fine"? And we know that there were such people because they're referenced in the Bible. We don't have their books. Was it only after the destruction that the prophets who predicted destruction and prophesied about it, that they were substantiated and those were included in the text? So there's all these questions I don't know, and frankly, I don't know what it means to say, "Thus says God." In my life, I have had people say that to me. It scares the pants off of me. Because you remember there was a fellow in the Bible who heard God tell him to kill his son, his only son, the one he loved, on Mount Moriah. I'm always worried about a guy who's going to say, "God told me to come kill the rabbi." No, don't joke. There is a button under my desk that was installed some years ago when this happened. And if I push that button, the police come barging in with guns drawn. That's our deal, because you never know. So the rabbis had the same problem. They got really worried about people saying, "Thus says God." So they switched the mechanism. If you want to know what God wants you to do today, you open the book of the Torah. Because the interpretation of the Torah yields one more level of sort of rational protection before you get to that kind of "thus says God" thing. So there's something very frightening about this on the one hand. On the other hand, there's something very powerful about a guy who shows up and says, "God's not satisfied with your monuments and your boulevards. God judges a society by the treatment of the least among you, not the greatest among you." Right? There's something very satisfying about that. Yes, Bobby.
I know that this morning you're speaking to predominantly Jews, if not everyone.
We welcome everyone in this
I
shul.
know, but
As long as you're ashamed of who you are, you're welcome here.
this is a pretty good segue. So I'm assuming that you have contact with other clergy in other
Yes,
religions.
frequently.
And in the Christian and Catholic religion,
Yes.
do they read the prophets? And if they do,
Yeah.
they preach that from their bima.
Yes.
We have, okay, I'll get political. We have things in this country that are social justice decisions being made that makes me wonder if the evangelicals who place their votes in a certain way, if they go to church and they're getting the prophets,
Right.
like you explained this morning,
Yeah.
how,
Yeah.
how does
Well, first of all, this is a big argument now going on among in the evangelical community. There is a big political realignment going on, because there really is a deep sense of searching the heart about what it means to be evangelical politically, and what's called upon you if you're a follower of Christ. And don't take this, don't minimize this. It is a huge conversation. Franklin Graham, who came out very powerfully for Trump during the election, incited a very powerful discussion within evangelical communities about exactly what evangelical politics ought to be. And it's not a small thing. Bernie Sanders spoke at Liberty University during the campaign. And think about that for a second, that Liberty University, that's Falwell's University, invited Bernie Sanders to come and speak. And he said, "We're going to disagree about a lot of stuff, but I bet at heart we're going to have very similar values." And the conversation was very productive, very civil. And there is a big ferment in that community right now. That's the second question you asked. The first question you asked is typically especially evangelical Christians, but typically when Christians read the Hebrew Bible, they read it as a precursor to Christ. So they're going to look for all of the clues to Jesus coming. That's what they're looking for. They believe that he is a direct extension of the prophetic tradition, so much so that they rearrange the order of the books of the Hebrew Bible. So if you open a Hebrew Bible, like from here, you'll have 5 books of Torah, 8 books of prophets, and a bunch of books of writings. Esther, Ruth, Psalms, Job, Chronicles. If you go to any motel in America and you're bored with the television, and you open the top drawer and there's a Gideon's Bible, a Christian Bible, you will open it and you'll say, look, they rearranged the books. It goes Torah, and then writings, and then prophets, because they wanted to create a direct line, not just thematically, but literarily, between the Hebrew prophets and the Gospels. And that's how Christians read this. Now turn to page. Hosea. The word of the Lord came to Hosea, son of Beri, in the reigns of all these kings. King Jeroboam, same guy, same time as Amos, right? Okay? When the Lord first spoke to Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, everybody here over the age of 18? Good. I don't want to get in trouble. How old are you? Are you okay? Go get yourself a wife of whoredom. Zanut. Zonah is and a children of whoredom, for the land will stray from following the Lord. So he went and married Gomer, daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. And the Lord instructed him, and it goes on from there, okay? Now, what happens? Once upon a time, there was a man named Hosea, okay? And he was a sort of simple-minded fellow, but he fell madly in love with this woman. And she said, I can't marry you. And he said, I need you. And he said, I can't. She said, you don't want to be married to me. And she said, I want you. And finally, she gave in. She conceded, and they got married. Gomer, and it's ironic that's her name, because the word Gomer means to finish. She is a nymphomaniac. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way. She has a psychological, she's a sex addict. So she marries, and that's why she said, I don't want to marry you. She knew that this was her problem, and she knew that monogamy was not for her. It's Gomer bat Diblaim, which is very funny, because Gomer means to finish, and she can't, and Diblaim means double talk. So what does she do? So she has a kid, and the kid don't look anything like Papa. And she has another kid, and he don't look nothing like Papa. And she has a third kid, and she don't look nothing like Papa. And she says to Papa, listen, I need you to do me a favor. I have a sick friend. I got to go see her in a hospital. You're going to have to watch the kids tonight. Okay, honey, no problem. And Gomer puts on this really tight, really short red dress and this sweet-smelling perfume and puts on her hair and these real high-heel shoes. And Hosea says, you're going to the hospital to see a sick friend dressed like that? Oh, yeah, this makes her happy. And Gomer goes out, comes back 4 o'clock in the morning stinking of booze and cigarettes, and her makeup is smudged. And you get the picture? Yeah. Night after night after night after night. And finally, this thick-headed Hosea guy, he gets it. But then he has a revelation. And here's his revelation. This was not an accident. This was not a mistake of romance. This was not, well, I had a psychologist friend who once called this a Madonna complex. That may be what it is, where men fall in love with bad girls. This was sent to him as a message because his feelings about her as a wanton wife, as an unfaithful wife, are an analogy to God's feelings about Israel, who was a wanton, unfaithful people. And he realizes that, at least he makes it up in his mind, or he realizes that he was sent this experience on purpose so he would feel God's rage, but also he would learn God's forgiveness. So the entire book is a double entendre. It is him screaming about this wife he loves and he knows is unfaithful, but at the same time, it is him giving voice to a God who is screaming about an unfaithful people, Israel. And the point of connection is the word Baal, which is the name of the Canaanite god that the Israelites were off worshiping. The vernacular word Baal means husband or lover. In other words, you've gone off with another Baal instead of the Baal that you were married to. You get it? So listen to the words of Hosea and try to hear them as the double entendre they are, right? You understand? It's him talking about mama to the kids, right? The kids are like asleep, so they can't hear this. But it's him talking about mama. It's him pacing the house, screaming at himself. And at the same time, he's also talking for God about Israel, right? Rebuke your mother. Rebuke her. For she's not my wife, and I'm not her husband. Let her put away her harlotry from her face and her adultery from between her breasts. Else I will strip her naked and leave her as in the day she was born, and I will make her like a wilderness and render her like a desert land, and let her die of thirst. The angry husband First goes through anger. That's the first stage of this, right? And what's the anger? I'll get my hands around that, I can't use the word, that you-know-what's throat, and I'll choke the life out of her. That, what she did to me, she shamed me, and she made me a laughing stock, and he just wants to kill her. Right? You get that? Right? I will disown her children, for they're now harlot's brood. In that their mother played the harlot, she conceived them and acted shamelessly because she thought, I'll go after my lovers. The word lovers is ba'alim. You see, so it's the double entendre. Lovers and also idols, right? Who supply my bread and my water, my wool and my linen, my oil and my drink. The people of Israel credited Baal with all of their prosperity. Assuredly, and Mama says, well, I could leave you at any time and go with my lovers, and they'll feed me and take care of me. They'll give me gifts, right? Assuredly, I will hedge up her roads with thorns and raise walls against her, and she shall not find her paths. Pursue her lovers as she will. She will not overtake them, and seek them as she may. She shall never find them. So what's going to happen? Here's the second thing, right? In the end, he says, I don't have to hurt her. Because you know what's going to happen? Because she's so cheap, because she's so wanted, eventually her lovers are going to give up on her. Eventually her lovers will give up on her, and she will find herself alone in the world. Remember, he's talking both about the wife and about Israel. Eventually Israel is going to discover that the worship of idols is futile. It doesn't get you what you want. It doesn't bring you the prosperity you're looking for. And at that moment of loneliness, then she will say, and here's his fantasy, remember? He's at home. Then she will say, I will go and return to my first husband, for then I fared better than now. Someday she's going to come back to me. Someday she's going to come begging me to take her home. Begging me to take her home. He's having this whole conversation with himself, right? Because she's not home. He's having this whole conversation with herself. And she didn't consider this, that it was I who bestowed on her the new grain and wine and oil. I who lavished silver on her and gold, which she used for Baal. Assuredly, right, I will take back my new grain in its time, right? And go to it says chapter 2. He says chapter 2. And my new wine in its season. And I will snatch away my wool and my linen that served to cover her nakedness. And so what does he say? When she comes back to me, what am I going to do? I'm going to slam the door in her face. I don't want that. You know what? I don't want her here. She's been so unfaithful to me. Let her starve. Let her die. Who cares? That's his anger speaking, right? That's his anger speaking. Now I will uncover her shame in the very sight of her lovers, and none shall save her from me. And me shouldn't be capitalized there, because it's the double entendre. It's the husband speaking about the wife, and God speaking about Israel. You see it? And I will end her rejoicings, her festival new moons and Sabbaths, and all her festive seasons. Those are her feasts, right? And I will lay waste her vines and fig trees, which she thinks are a fee she received from her lovers, and I will turn them into brushwood, and beasts of the field shall devour her. Then I will punish her for the days of the Baalim, on which she brought them offerings, when decked with earrings and jewels. She would go after her lovers, forgetting me, declares the Lord. So this is the cheated on, the cuckolded husband, the cheated on husband, raging about his wife. She'll go out and I'll reject her, and she'll get rejected by her lovers, and then she'll come crawling, begging back to me, but I'll slam the door in her face and let her starve, and let her be exposed to the world as the cheap, evil creature that she is. But what happens to anger? It burns out. It burns out. It's like it flames out. And you can feel it right here. This is the switch, right? The anger flames out. And he stops a minute and he takes a big deep breath. Maybe he looks at the kids who are sleeping in front of him, right? And what does he feel now? What good will that do? Do I really want to live without her? I still love her. She's still important to me. I knew she has a problem, but she's still important to me. She still means something to me. And once his anger flames out, then a completely different response kicks in. Listen carefully. She'll come back to me one day, begging me to take her back. And while I will be tempted to slam the door and tell her to go away, what will I do? Assuredly, I will speak coaxingly to her. and speak to her tenderly. And I will give her vineyards from there. Let me get it for you. Let me get it for you. Pick up your foot. Of course, yeah. I will give her vineyards from there, and the valley of Achor as a plowland of hope. And she shall respond as in the days of her wandering, when she came up from the land of Egypt. And in that day declares the Lord, you will call me Ishi, my husband, my man, and no more call me Baali. For I will remove the names of the Baalim from her mouth, and they shall never more be mentioned by name. In that day I will make a covenant for them with the beasts of the fields and the birds of the air and the creeping things of the ground. So this is not just a covenant. With her, I will remake the world into the Garden of Eden. And if you're thinking husband talk, what is he saying? On the day she comes back to me, I won't hurt her. I will bring her back and I will bathe her and I will protect her. And we will start over again and we'll be remarried. And this time it'll be good. He's imagining this time she will understand what I did for her. This time she will appreciate me. This time she will be faithful to me. I will banish bow and sword and war from the land. And thus I will let them lie down safely. The personal narrative is no more anger. And the universal narrative is a time of new covenant, right? And I will espouse you forever. Erastichli leolam. Stichli b'tzedek u'b'mishpat. I will espouse you with righteousness and justice and with goodness and with mercy. By the way, that's the words you say. Anybody know when you say those words? Yes, when you put your tefillin on in the morning, that's what you say. Because you put your tefillin around your finger, Stichli leolam, and many people say that under the chuppah. Now, it's ironic that you say it under the chuppah, because now that you know the context, it's, right? But this is the, so the anger burns out, the rage dissipates, the pain goes away, and he's living in this sort of dream fantasy that she's going to come back and it's going to be good again. It's going to be like we were kids again, and we'll start again, and we'll love each other, and we'll protect each other, and it will be right, and this time it will be right, right? And with goodness and mercy I will espouse you in faithfulness. Then you shall be devoted to the Lord. In that day I will respond, declares the Lord. In that day I will respond to the sky, and it shall respond to the earth. And the earth shall respond with new grain and wine and oil, and they shall respond to Jezreel, which is the valley of the north of Israel. And I will sow her in the land as my own, and take back Lu Ruchama, these are the names of the kids, and Lo Ami, and say, you are my people, and they will respond, you will be my God. It's a brilliant piece of literature. The anger, the cheated on husband becomes an analogy for the cheated on God. So that idolatry is imagined as spiritual adultery. And the emotional arc of this poor man whose wife has betrayed him, the emotional arc from rage and pain and his fantasy of what I'm going to do to that woman if I get my hands around her throat, to I'll slam the door and let her starve and let the whole world see what a whore she is and expose her for the indignities that she's inflicted on me. And then there's this big deep breath and it's no. She'll come back to me and we'll start again. And she'll learn her lesson and it will be good and it will be right. And the prophet who said, and that becomes an analogy to a God who's dealing with an unfaithful Israel. So Hosea becomes the most profound prophet of tshuva, of a God who's willing to forgive anything, any degree of indignity that Israel inflicted upon God, any of the brokenness of this relationship. And he becomes the principal prophet of tshuva. And these words are recited on Shabbat Shuvah. This is the Haftorah of Shabbat Shuvah as well, right? This section about I'll take you back. No matter what you've done, I'll take you back. And it's a fantasy of, this time she'll learn her lesson. And sort of the subtext is, how many times does this guy have to go through this before he learns? How many times will God go through this? And that's the doing God and man. A husband at one point will give up and say, forget this. God never gives up. God never gives up. David.
There was a French film that was made in the 60s
Yeah.
It's depicted in that film. It's adapted.
Yeah.
In a contemporary way. Where she fools around, and her husband is confined to a wheelchair, and she's out gallivanting every night.
Yeah.
He takes her back.
Ah.
So, I mean, it's an interesting analogy.
Right.
How it was adapted into
Right.
French cinema.
Right. You can't hide your lion eyes. Right. Right. I was listening to that song once on the radio. I said, "Oh my God, it's the prophet Hosea." Right. Right. What are the verses about? She's going out to see her friend, but I know where she's really going. That's exactly. But you see what the prophet does, and it's bizarre, but it's magnificent. He doesn't simply suffer. What redeems him is that he sees his suffering as prophecy. I was given this experience in order that I could feel what God feels. And he writes the book, or he speaks the words, so that we can share divine pathos, a God who has felt betrayed. It's just brilliant. I mean, it's just I think it is. It's just remarkable. The loyalty, God just wants loyalty. I'll give you anything you want, just be loyal. No, can't do it. She can't do it. Now, if you look at the next page, just quickly, because we have no time left, in Hosea 11, at the end of the book, he switches metaphors. He switches his metaphor from the cheated on husband to the betrayed parent. Okay? I don't know how many of you have kids, and I don't know how many of you have kids who have ever done anything wrong. I don't know if you ever had that experience. But if you had, you'll appreciate this, right? So now it's a different metaphor, but it's also in the family, and it's also so deeply emotional. So if you contrast, by the way, just for a moment, contrast Amos and Hosea. This is what Billy pointed out before. Amos is concerned with social ills. Hosea is concerned with religious disloyalty. Amos speaks this powerful social gospel, this powerful social message. And it's very rational and and it's critical, it's political and rational. Hosea is a prophet all about the emotions. It's not that, it's not a religious sermon in the sense that it's, don't you know what you've done to God? It's it's so deeply emotional. Do you feel it? Look at 11, right? I fell in love with Israel when he was still a child. Oh. So who is God? God is the Father. And what did God do? God found an orphan. Who was the orphan? Israel. We were the orphan. We were living in this, it's Annie, we were living in this orphanage called Egypt. And God rescued us from there, right? And I have called him my son ever since Egypt, right? Remember, the sun will come out tomorrow, right? God goes to this orphanage called Egypt and finds a baby and takes him home. And takes him home and raises him, right? And raises him to be his own and gives him everything. And then what did we do? We betrayed him. We went and worshipped others and pretended that they were and dad's at home going, what? You didn't, it's Father's Day, you didn't call? Like, hello, I'm right here. Like, I'm the one, I gave you your bicycle, I taught you to walk, I paid for your college, and you're doing, like, where, what? Thus they were called, but they went their own way. How many parents have said that? They sacrificed to Baalim and offered to carved images. I have pampered Ephraim. Ephraim is the name of the northern kingdom. That's Israel. That's who he's talking to, right? Taken them in my arms, but they've ignored my healing care. I drew them with human ties, with cords of love. Yeah, emotional, right? But I seemed to them as one who imposed a yoke on their jaws. Though I was offering them food, no, they returned to the land of Egypt. And Assyria is their king, because they refused to repent. A sword shall descend upon their towns and consume their limbs and devour them because of their designs. For my people persists in its defection from me. When it's summoned upward, it does not rise at all. So here you have the father who says, right, you betrayed me. You went back to those bastards who hurt you in the orphanage, and you think they're going to take care of you? And then when he gets the same thing happens here as happened in chapter 2. Once the anger wears out, it burns out, he goes back to being tender again, right? How can I give up on you, Ephraim? This is the Torah reading for Rosh Hashanah, by the way. How surrender you, O Israel? How can I make you like Admah and render you like Zeboim? Those are places that everybody knew were destroyed, like Sodom and Gomorrah, right? I have had a change of heart. What a statement. It's not we who have to do tshuva. God does tshuva, right? If we do tshuva, God does tshuva. If we come home with some loyalty, God changes from anger to love, right? And all my tenderness is stirred. I will not act on my wrath, will not turn to destroy Ephraim, for I am God, not man. That's a great line. People are vindictive. People are spiteful. People hold grudges. People get off on the energy of rage. Me, God, I can give it up. That's divine. I'm the Holy One in your midst. This is the great prophet of divine pathos, of divine emotion. A prophet who imagines God first as a cheated on husband, a cheated lover who just wants the lover back, and then as a parent betrayed by the kid. And over again, what's his message? If you come home, the door will be open. Just come home. So I wish you a good Shabbos. Come home, right? We'll see each other next week. Take good care.